It's April 21st, and we are learning today about Talmud. If you happen to have our edition of the Talmud, that's great. We're in the black edition called Ein Yaakov. I'll show you a visual here. You see the visual? And if you don't have it, you can still follow along. It's not a problem. Okay. I don't yet see anyone on the screen, the comments. We might be having some issues with technical glitches, but we do have a live studio audience today. We have Keith and Ed with us here inside the live studio audience of Chabad Palm Beach Gardens global headquarters, right here in the Chabad Palm Beach Gardens. Great to have you guys with us. Okay, so let's start the class. I'm just going to try to figure out how to do this. Man, it would be so nice if we could see the chat. Okay, there it is. I see Elaine and Winston are saying Boker Tov in 2 different languages. Okay, so we got that. And, oh, I know where to find it. Here it is. There it is. Dean Dubansky and Winston are with us also on Facebook. You see where the comments are, guys? So the comments are on a different screen, basically. I don't know why it comes up like that, but it does. So at least we see the comments that way. Howard and Susan as well. Facebook so far is okay. Yesterday crashed on us, so let's go. Let's hit the road. You ready, guys? So my problem is that the other guy, well, we'll keep the screen on so you can see me as well. All right, let's go. Okay, I'm starting on page 206. If you happen to have the Talmud in front of you, the Talmud discusses the importance of wearing tefillin while saying the Shema. Ula said, if someone recites the Shema without wearing tefillin, it is as if he is testifying falsely about himself. Shema is a testimonial. You're saying, Shema Yisrael, hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God. There is only one God. And what do you read in the Shema? There's 3 paragraphs in the Shema. The first 2 are 2 paragraphs that mention the mitzvah of tefillin. There's actually 4 paragraphs in the entire Torah that mention the mitzvah of tefillin. All 4 of those paragraphs are inside of our tefillin, in the head and the arm. So 2 of the 4 paragraphs that mention tefillin are being recited in the Shema. If you read the Shema without wearing tefillin, it's as if you're bearing false testimony about yourself. Look, what you're saying is good, but you're just not fulfilling your own directive. It is as if he's testifying falsely about God, about God, God forbid, since at that very moment that he's testifying to God's oneness, he's not wearing the tefillin, which demonstrates this idea. In other words, it's somewhat of an insincere or imperfect pledge, right? Because when someone is clearly violating, it's like going to a marriage therapist that might be divorced, right? Imagine going to a marriage counselor who's divorced. You're like, what am I supposed to do now? You know, like, what kind of information can this person give me, right? Or if you go to, well, not necessarily. Okay, whatever. Or maybe going to a doctor. How about this? Going to a pulmonologist that smokes, right? Maybe that's a better example, right? You know, here he is. The doctor's telling me not to smoke while he's smoking a cigarette. So what does that tell you? It's like 1 second, doc, right? Or imagine you go to a doctor that tells you to take a vaccine, but he hasn't been vaccinated. So what happens now? You're like, do I listen or do I not listen, right? So there's something missing. It's not saying that what they're saying is not true. It is true. What they're saying is true. But you feel a little bit off because they're not setting a personal example. And that's what happens, says the Talmud, when you say Shema, when you're not wearing tefillin. Rabbi Chia bar Abba said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, it is as if he offered a daily ola offering without the mincha along with it. In other words, you did something great, but you just didn't do all the pitchifkis, all the details. Or if you brought an offering in the temple without the required libations, right? So too, if a person says the Shema without fulfilling its commandments, it's considered like you didn't finish the mitzvah properly. In other words, this boils down to the idea of Zeh Keili v'anvehu. This is my God, and I will glorify Him. What that means is that we're supposed to observe something called Hidur Mitzvah, the beautification of the mitzvah. If you buy yourself a Torah book, what are you going to buy? The cheapest one, or you buy the nicest one? If you buy a Torah, what are you going to buy? You're going to make you're going to get the cheapest wood, and and some fake metal to plate it with, or you're going to use real silver and real wood and nice embroidery on it. Whenever you do a mitzvah, you're supposed to go all the way, right? We're supposed to spend as much as we can on buying the most beautiful esrog, building a beautiful sukkah, the most expensive matzah, not because we're looking to waste, but because we're glorifying Hashem with the observance of this mitzvah, right? People like to kvetch and complain about the price of kosher food, but that's not what it's about. God actually wants you to spend a little bit more to show that you care, right? So you're supposed to go the extra mile in the fulfillment of the mitzvah. Another statement from Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan also said, whoever wishes to accept upon himself the authority of heaven in a complete manner should perform his bodily functions, and then wash his hands, and then put on tefillin, and then recite the Shema and the Shemona Esrei. This is the complete acceptance of God's authority. First thing you should do in the morning, go to the bathroom and wash your hands. Because if you don't do that part, then you're going to be unsettled, right? So go to the bathroom, cleanse your body. Then put on tefillin, then say the Shema and the Shemona Esrei. And that is a complete acceptance of God's authority. Right? A related teaching. I was talking yesterday to a Jew. Who said to me something interesting. He said he's a Messianic Jew. Okay. Which means he believes in the New Testament. Yeah, my thoughts exactly. And he says to me, why do I need to lay tefillin? I get that on my own. When I feel it in my heart, I believe in one God. When I do that in my heart, then I'm good. So I looked at him and I said, okay, so when you pay your taxes, I guess you just say that I pay my taxes in my heart, and that's it. I'm sure the IRS is very happy with that, right? He actually didn't get what I was saying. He was like, yeah, that's what he said. I don't think he understood what I was talking about. But anyways, I see the comments coming in over here. Anyways, why am I saying this? I'm talking about the tefillin because the Torah commands us to do tefillin, right? God wants the action of the tefillin. And even though we think that we understand the ultimate purpose of the action of the tefillin, that doesn't mean that is the be-all and the end-all of the tefillin, right? There are physical as well as spiritual implications of our actions. And just because we think that the only physical implication is a box being on our arm and on our head, that doesn't preclude the presence of the spiritual power, the spiritual energy which is unleashed, and the light that is unleashed from the observance of that mitzvah, right? So whilst this guy I met yesterday was looking at it on a very shallow, one-dimensional perspective of laying tefillin, there's a lot more to this. It's like it's like bowing before the king. Also, bowing before the king is an action, right? If you tell the king, I'm not bowing before you because I'm bowing in my heart, he's not going to appreciate that either, right? It is an act of submission, an act of commitment, of alliance, allegiance, right? Which is very, very important. We vote with our hands and our feet. It's very, very important. Let's take a look at the comments. Marty's with us, Boker Tov. How can you wear tefillin when laying down? Who said, Marty, that we're laying tefillin when laying down? I don't know why you think it says laying tefillin when laying down, unless what you may be talking about is that in the Shema it says, and these words you shall speak of them when you wake up in the morning and when you walk in the way, when you lay down and when you rise up. It doesn't mean that you're supposed to say the Shema lying down. It means you're supposed to say the Shema at the time of your laying down, which means at bedtime. You're supposed to say Shema in the morning when you wake up and at the time of waking up. Yeah, I see that you wrote, say the Shema when you lie down. You're not supposed to necessarily say the Shema lying down. You're supposed to say it sitting up or standing or sitting up. But you do it at the time of your laying down, right? Elaine, it's a disconnect. I'm not sure what you're referring to, Elaine. Please clarify. And I see that Winston's connection in Indonesia is strong. Thank God. Good to hear that. What was that, Keith? Oh, Ivan, good. All right. If we got it right, I got my interpreter here. That's good. No, you don't put tefillin on at night. Oh, that's a good question, actually. Because it says, who says Shema without tefillin, bearing false testimony or imperfect testimony. And now you're saying, Keith is asking a Talmudic question, but you're supposed to say Shema twice a day. Does this mean you lay tefillin twice a day? The answer is no. Because you're not allowed to lay tefillin at night. So what then happens to the person who says the Shema at night without the tefillin? Is he also bearing false testimony? The answer is no, because that's not when the obligation applies. In other words, if someone tells you to if your doctor tells you to get the vaccine, right? And he's not yet been vaccinated, there might be something wrong with that. But if he tells you to get the vaccine after he's been vaccinated, then there's nothing wrong with that.
The commandment is you're supposed to say the Shema when you have the tefillin on.
Right.
So do that in the morning.
No, it doesn't say you have to say the Shema with tefillin on. No, so let's explain. So let's understand. So Marty's asking. Keith is asking some good questions of here. He's like, so what exactly is the context or the frame of reference of the obligation? Right? It doesn't say anywhere in the Torah that when you say Shema, you have to wear tefillin. What it does say is that the Shema is a testimonial of our allegiance to belief in one God, and so is the tefillin. Therefore, someone who says Shema without the tefillin is lacking somewhat in his testimonial. But that would only apply in a circumstance when the tefillin is relevant, such as the daytime. Or you could ask the same question about a Shabbos, by the way. The same exact question you could ask about Shabbos. Shabbos, we don't lay tefillin. So how about a Shabbos? You're in the daytime, you're saying Shema, but you're not wearing tefillin. So the answer is because tefillin is not obligated in the Shabbos, right? So when tefillin is not obligated, nobody's expecting you to wear the tefillin as a completion of your testimonial, because it's not part of the testimonial. In fact, by wearing tefillin when God wants you not to wear them, you're actually detracting from your testimonial. If you wear tefillin when God tells you not to wear them, then what are you doing? You're saying, I don't really care about what God wants me to do. Exactly. I do what I want to do. Right? So it's a nice Talmudic discussion there. Okay, I see Dan is with us and Peter. Peter says, annoying how much they make such a big deal about the clothing. I guess it was the finery of the day. I'm not sure, Peter, what you're talking about. Maybe I missed something about the clothing. Peter, please clarify. I don't know what you're talking about, man. Did we say anything about clothing, Keith? Ed? The clothing. Maybe tefillin is clothing? Peter, please clarify, because I'm not sure exactly what you're talking about. Okay, so Elaine explains that she was referring to your earlier statements about false testimony, etc. Oh, there you go. She was explaining the disconnect. She was saying it's a disconnect when you do something, when you say something, but your actions aren't on the same plane. Thank you, Elaine, for standing up and helping me there. Marty, so you don't wear it when you lay down. That's what I said. Correct. You don't wear it when you lay down. You're not supposed to sleep in your tefillin. Right? Whenever you're wearing tefillin, you're supposed to be in a state of consciousness, which means not just alive consciousness, but aware consciousness. You're supposed to be aware of the presence of one God in your life whenever your tefillin are upon you, which is why you're not really supposed to talk when your tefillin are on. You're not supposed to have small talk or discuss the Minnesota trial or the Super Bowl or other mundane conversation while you're wearing the tefillin. While you're wearing the tefillin, you're supposed to be thinking only about one God. Right? You're supposed to be aware and conscious of that. And let me tell you, when you start your day with a few minutes of wearing tefillin, we just finished our consciousness right now. We finished davening, we're wearing a tefillin. Let me tell you, when you have half an hour, 40 minutes of wearing tefillin and you get into the zone, your whole day is elevated, is conscious. Speaking to Ed here, who hasn't been to shul in such a long time because of the pandemic, and you came back today for the very first time. I hope that you felt the sense of connect, right, with the consciousness of the tefillin. All right, so Peter clarified his comment. He changed it. Let's see. Annoying how much of you did, but Peter, I'm not sure what you mean when you say you changed the comment. Please clarify, Peter, what clothing you are referring to. Are you referring to the tefillin as clothing, or maybe you're talking about something else? I'll give you a few minutes to write in your comment. Okay, fine. Let's keep on going further. Said Rabbi Chia bar Abba in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, anyone who when waking up in the morning performs his bodily functions, washes his hands, puts on tefillin, and then recites the Shema and prays the Shemona Esrei, is considered by the verse as if he built a mizbeach, an altar, and offered a korban, an offering to God upon it, for it is written in Tehillim, Psalms 26, I wash in cleanliness my hands and circle your altar, God. This verse thus teaches us that when a person washes his hands before prayer, he is considered to have circled the altar and offered an offering upon it. Interesting, right? I know someone who this Friday afternoon experienced something which was a little bit like a little baby miracle for him. You know, something that was very important to him, but it wouldn't be something that you'd call the cops about. Something, that was important to him. And in a stroke of unlikely coincidence, which could only have been understood as divine providence, he experienced the result that he needed. And he was very grateful. So he told me he wants to offer an offering before God. So I said to him, look, you can either make a donation from your resources to tzedakah, right, which is an offering before God, or here's another way to do it. Wake up in the morning, wash your hands, right? Go to the bathroom, wash your hands, put on tefillin, and then say the Shema. That also is considered as if you're offering an offering before God. Okay, guys, feel free to write your comments in. It's always better that way to engage, ask your questions. Keith, right? Feel free. Ed, challenge, right? Good. Let's keep on going. The Gemara continues. Rava said to Rabbi Chia bar Abba, does master not hold that he is also considered as if he immersed and purified his body inside his entire body in a mikveh? Rabbi Chia bar Abba replied, you have spoken well indeed. We can show from the verse that it is considered as if he immersed and purified his entire body in a mikveh, since in that very verse it is written, I wash in cleanliness, which implies that he is washing his entire body, and it's not written, I wash my hands. Now, this is not just merely semantics. It's considered as if he went to the mikveh. It's not considered as if he went to the mikveh. The idea of going to the mikveh is atonement, is purification. When a person comes out of the mikveh, they're purified from the contamination, the spiritual contamination, which they might have encountered previously until this moment. And therefore, what the Talmud is saying is that it's considered as if you went to the mikveh. Means that you've been purified from much spiritual contamination, from negative energy, and we all know how much we could be spared. We can do without all of that negative energy in our lives, in our relationships, in our workplaces, in our conscious thoughts. We're very happy to divest of that kind of negative energy, which is why it's very important for us to understand that when we do lay the tefillin, after going to the bathroom and washing your hands, and after that we say the Shema, that is actually a very purifying process to cleanse us from our shmutz. Another teaching of the verse said, Ravina said to Rava, that the master see this young rabbinical student who came from the west, from the Holy Land, and said, someone who does not have water to wash his hands before prayer should clean his hands by rubbing them with earth, with pebbles, or with chips of wood. So you're supposed to wash your hands before you pray, but if you don't have water, you're supposed to use a little earth, a little pebble, or a little chip of wood to rub on your hand just to take any schmutz off. Rava replied, the student has spoken well, for it is written in the verse, I wash with water. No, it doesn't say I wash with water. It says I wash in cleanliness. This implies that anything that cleanses may be used to prepare for prayer. Therefore, a person can substitute something else when he does not have water. Okay. Now, the next piece of the Talmud is going to talk a little bit more, some details about how we're supposed to pronounce the words of the Shema. The Mishnah now discusses the law of someone who recited the Shema but did not pronounce the letters of the words clearly. After discussing a number of related, tells us the reward for those who are careful to pronounce the words of the Shema clearly and do not allow the final letter of one word to run into the next word. Let me give an example. So let's say you have a word that ends with the same letter that the next word begins with, right? Like my brother-in-law. His name is Levik, and his last name is Krinsky. So his name ends with a K and it starts with a K. Levik Krinsky, right? Or my son, his name is Zev, Z-E-V, Vigler. So you could technically say Zev Vigler or Levik Krinsky, where there's one K sound. If you did that, then you actually did not complete the word before starting the next word. What you should say is Levik Krinsky. Zev Vigler. And the same thing is within the Shema. For example, when it says in the first verse of the first paragraph, Ve'ahavta et Hashem Elokecha, and you shall love God, your God, bechol levavecha, with all your heart. Bechol end to the lamed, levavecha starts to the lamed. So you can say bechol levavecha in one quick sweep, bechol levavecha, where you're effectively saying with all your heart, you're saying it with one lamed. And you didn't say the word properly, but if you say bechol levavecha, if you stop between the words, then what you've done is that you've enunciated them properly. And I'm going to show you something in the siddur, something very nice. If you look closely in the siddur, I'm going to put my finger to point here on the screen. You see where I'm pointing, guys? You see where it says bechol levavecha? You see there's a line in between bechol and levavecha? That line is something which we typically ignore. Our eyes ignore that line because it doesn't mean anything. But I'm going to tell you what it means. It's supposed to be a break. Just like on the keyboard, you have that line is one of my favorite keys in the keyboard. It's a break between two ideas, right? I don't know what it's called, but it's a break between two ideas. So too, it appears in the Shema whenever you have two words. I'll show you another place. Look in the screen. Here's another space, 2 lines down. You see over here? Al levavecha, on your heart, upon your heart. Al ends of the lamed and starts of the lamed, right? So al levavecha, and you'll notice anytime where the two words start and end with the same sound. We do the same thing over the page in the second paragraph. I'll show you one more example. So over here it's v'chara'af. So even though the first word ends with a hey and the second word starts with an aleph, because they end and start with the same sound, the hey and the aleph make the same ah sound. Therefore there's a break. V'chara'af. If you just say v'chara'af, it's like one word. But if you say v'chara, stop, af, then what you've done is that you've created the proper break between the two sounds. Okay, so the Gemara now tells us the reward for those who are careful to pronounce the word properly, and you really are supposed to be careful to articulate and audibly hear the words of your prayer. So when you daven, you're supposed to go. You're not supposed to daven only with your eyes. You know, Keith, you know this. You're not supposed to just look like this. You have to daven audibly with your lips, like this. Not loud enough to bother anybody else next to you, but just that your own ears can hear, right? And when you do it, you're supposed to do it in a way where each word is complete. You'll notice when I read Torah, or when anybody reads Torah, we articulate every single word. You're not even allowed to, whatever, I don't get too technical, so forget it. All right, good. The Gemara now discusses the verse, when the Almighty scatters kings in it, in the land of Israel, shall those in shadowy darkness be whitened. Let's take a look. Reb Chaim, the son of Rabbi Hanina, says, whoever recites the Shema and carefully pronounces its words and letters, Gehenna is called for him. Purgatory has the AC turned on for him. That's pretty cool. Mind the pun, right? Isn't that nice? To get a little air conditioning in your purgatory experience, right? If you say, I mean, who doesn't appreciate air conditioning, right? If you stop to say every word of the Shema properly, then you'll have a much cooler experience in purgatory. As it says, when the Almighty scatters kings in it, shall those in shadowy darkness be whitened, literally shall be like snow. What this means is that snow is like cool. It means it's going to be a little cold for you in purgatory. In other words, if we've learned this, by the way, recently in a different course in Journey of the Soul, we learned that purgatory is actually a good thing. It's not a bad thing. We don't believe like the Christians that hell is a place of eternal damnation. We believe that purgatory is a place of temporary cleansing, right? It's therapeutic. But the question is, how shocking is going to be your therapeutic experience, right? So is it going to be more intense or is it going to be less intense? So the fact that you said the Shema properly serves as a cause to mitigate the intensity of the shock of your experience. For the purpose of expanding the verse, do not read the word befaresh, but rather befaresh when he is clear. So you're supposed to read it like this: when the Almighty is clear, then those in the shadow of death and purgatory are cooled. In other words, if you will accept the authority of the Almighty clearly, if you accept the authority of God clearly by properly separating the letters and the words of the Shema, then the Torah, through which the kings of Israel rule, will cool off like snow the shadow of death for you. So whatever. I mean, it's difficult if you don't have the book in front of you to really understand this, because what the Talmud is really doing right now is changing 4 of the words ever so slightly. So instead of reading it, when the Almighty scatters kings, in it shall those in shadowy darkness be whitened, you read it like this. If you'll accept the authority of the Almighty clearly by properly separating the letters and the words of the Shema, then the Torah through which the kings of Israel rule will cool off like snow the shadow of death. Very nice. That's it, right? That's the idea. I see that Warren is telling us that it's called a rest and music. I think you're talking, Warren, about the that paragraph break. It's called a rest and music. I'm not sure what "and music" means, but it seems like you're saying that it's called a rest. That key. It's just on top of the return button on the enter key. The enter key on my keyboard. I see it right here. It's a little line. It separates, right? Okay. So let's do just a little bit further, unless we have any questions so far. Any questions from the studio audience here? Virtual or live? Anybody questions? No? Okay. So we'll go just a little bit further. You good, Keith? Okay. Another teaching, and Rabbi Chamas, the son of Rabbi Chanina, said, why are the words tense? Well, what's that? Just before I go there, I just want to expand on this for a quick moment. I want to say this. When you say the Shema, guys, it's the one time of the prayer that you really should slow down. You know when you drive your car, normally it's 50, 60 miles an hour, but then you come to these areas that are like school zones, and you just go real slow. What is it, 15 miles an hour or something? It's like a real slow school zone. That's what the Shema is. Even though the rest of the prayers, you're davening maybe a little quicker, right? You're doing your thing at your own pace, whatever. But when you come to the Shema, you really, really should slow down. No matter how much you pray in your own regimen, in your own schedule, when you daven the Shema, take it easy, slow it down, and try to articulate each and every single word. I gave a course on this on the Shema. I said you can really learn to read and pronounce every single word. You can find that course at jewishgardens.com/spiritual. That's jewishgardens.com/spiritual, where you can actually learn to read the Shema and to understand every single word in the Shema, to be able to read it with more meaning and intensity. I'm just going to go a little bit deeper into the fires of purgatory to get a little bit more clarity in the fires of purgatory. So if you have the book, I'm at the very bottom of the page, 209. There's a difficulty with Gemara's teaching that the fires of Gehenna are cooled for someone who recites each word of the Shema deliberately and properly. If the person is completely righteous, then he's not put into purgatory altogether, that he should need its fires to be cooled for him. And if he is not completely righteous, so that he needs the atonement of purgatory to purify him, then cooling its fires for him deprives him of the atonement benefit. So once again, what is the point of being there? So the Tzlach explains that even completely righteous people pass through purgatory on their way to Gan Eden for the sake of their less righteous relatives. So they go to purgatory for their cousins, whose atonement is nearly complete, but who are unable to free themselves from purgatory because the prisoner cannot free himself. As the righteous person passes through, however, he is able to free these relatives and take them along with him to the Garden of Eden. His short passage through the fires of purgatory to save his relatives, though, does cause him some degree of suffering. It is this suffering of the righteous man that is eliminated because of the fires. The fires are cooled for him when he passes through it. If he was careful to recite each word of the Shema carefully. Now, I have to tell you that's not exactly the way I understand this idea, because the way I understand the idea of purgatory as taught in the Hasidic sources is that purgatory is not a bad thing at all. And the way we just understood it, purgatory was pretty bad. It was a punishment. It was vindictive. It was evil. But we don't see purgatory as a bad thing at all. Purgatory is an amazing thing. I mean, do you regret? Do you feel bad when you have to take your car to the car wash? It's like not a big deal. Actually, I'm very happy to take my car to the car wash. I drop it off, get my car back like it's brand new. It's awesome. I love it, right? When I send my clothes to the cleaners, I don't feel bad. Oh my God, I'm so terrible. I'm sending my shirt to the cleaners. I feel great because I'm going to get back a brand new shirt. It's great. So that's how the Hasidic approach to purgatory is. You look at it as a place, you lived your life, and inevitably as a human being, you probably experienced cognitive dissonance in what you perceived and in what you acted, kind of like saying the Shema without tefillin. Or maybe you believed in one God, but your actions didn't always reflect that truth, right? Maybe you made some bad decisions. Maybe you spoke some things, silly things that you shouldn't have said, right? So what happens in purgatory is we just sort of getting aligned. It's like you're tuning up your car. You're getting your car serviced. You're getting your soul serviced. That's all it is. But when you get your soul serviced, how intense is it actually going to be, right? For example, the way an example that I like to teach about what purgatory, might look like, is that you go to sit in a movie theater, and beside you is God, and you're watching the movie. What's playing is your life. Can you imagine sitting with God or your father and mother and watching the story of your life in every intimate detail? Ouch. Can you imagine how embarrassed you're going to be? So now if God is like giving you the eyes the whole time, you'll feel awful. But imagine if God has his arm around your shoulder. I mean, anthropomorphically speaking, right? Imagine if God kind of puts his arm around you and he's like, listen, I understand. Don't worry about it. He sort of softens the blow. That would be cooling the fires of purgatory. You'll feel bad, but not so bad. And that's what happens when you say the Shema with every single word. Now, this is not just a function of saying the words. It's a function of the importance that you give to the saying of the words, right? The fact that you're able to actually say the words properly means that you care about this idea. You're internalizing it, you're verbalizing it, you're engraving it upon your being, as opposed to just saying it at 47 or 147 miles an hour, or words per minute, right? Corey's asking a question, but is there pain to the soul while being cleansed? Of course, that's what I just said. Of course there's pain to the soul while being cleansed. When you're watching the story of your life, Corey, right? And you're embarrassed by the things that you did, that, sometimes the blood drains to your face and sometimes it drains from your face, right? That's the purgatory of fire or the purgatory of snow, right? Depending how humiliating, how embarrassing it is what you're seeing is depending on whether the blood's going to run from your face, fear, or to your face, shame, right? So yes, of course it hurts. Your car and shirt are not alive to feel pain. Your soul is. Okay, it's only an analogy, Corey. It is only an analogy. And yes, your soul is alive. And therefore there's a sense of pain. But the question is how much pain. And that's what the Talmud is telling us about the pain being what's the word? Cushioned, right? Cushioned by the cooling of the Gehinnom. Good morning, David Rosen from Lakewood, New Jersey. He runs the restaurants out there. Thank you, David. Good to speak with you. Okay, good to study with you. Winston, how to face Jerusalem properly when saying the Shema? Is there a GPS application according to the current location? Yes, there is. If you go to the App Store, Winston, and you download at the App Store the Siddur, the Chabad Siddur. I'll show you my phone what it looks like. Here. If you go to this app, 1 second, where is it? Shows you on my phone what it looks like. You see the Chabad Siddur over there, the blue one? It's called the Annotated Siddur by Kehot, Kehoti. I encourage everybody to download this app, by the way. I think it costs like $3, but it's well worth it. It's an app to have a siddur on your phone. It's called the Kehot Siddur, Kehot. Costs you about $3. But when you get on that, there's actually a compass feature on there, which tells you exactly where Jerusalem is, right? Facing east. And besides that, it tells you exactly what services you're supposed to pray, depending on what day of the year it is, and your location and your time zone. So it's a pretty cool siddur, which is like constantly updating in real time. Kehot Annotated Siddur, right? Okay, anyway, friends, I'm going to call it a day. Today is Wednesday. No classes that I'm aware of today. I know Corey gives a class in Hebrew reading for men and women at 11:30, Hebrew language and Jewish initiation on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Tuesday is Hebrew language through the Psalms of David. Thursday is Hebrew language through the Siddur, through the prayer book. And that's Tuesdays and Thursdays, 11:30 a.m. on Zoom, jewishgardens.com/Zoom with Corey Nadell. With that, folks, I'm going to wish you a wonderful day. Thank you for joining me today. And we'll continue tomorrow morning with the kosher crash course. We'll continue with the foods that are bad for you. Talk to you tomorrow. Have a great day. Shalom.